Canada is in the middle of a massive gamble, one of the biggest defense acquisitions in its entire history. The plan on paper looks bold. Renew and expand the aging submarine fleet. Give Ottawa some bragging rights on the world stage. And finally claim that elusive thing every Canadian politician keeps promising: independence from Washington's grip. Sounds good, right? Until you realize this plan is being steered by Mark Carney, a man who talks like a statesman but acts like a banker in a costume. And the deeper you dig into this so-called $20 billion victory, the more it looks like a spectacular, self-inflicted humiliation. Let's start with the basics. Canada's existing submarine fleet is a joke. 4 second-hand British boats bought almost 3 decades ago, 2 of which are usually out of commission at any given time. Maintenance problems, breakdowns, bad investments. Canada never got what it paid for. By 2035, those rust buckets are going to be completely useless. So Carney steps up and says, "We're going to fix this once and for all." He promises Canadians not just replacements, but a fleet expansion to 12 modern submarines. And he pitches it as the largest, most ambitious defense investment Canada has ever attempted. $100 billion over decades. An entire new backbone for Canadian naval power. The contenders narrowed quickly. A German-Norwegian consortium and a South Korean company. Spain and Sweden didn't even make the final cut. Carney strutted across Europe, cameras flashing, trying to look like a world leader. He toured German shipyards, shook hands with executives, and reassured the Koreans he wasn't playing favorites. In front of microphones, he declared this procurement Canada's ticket to Arctic dominance. Proof that Ottawa could stand tall without Washington's blessing. The headlines loved it, for about 5 minutes. Then reality walked in the door, wearing a red tie. Donald Trump didn't need a press conference. He didn't need a European tour. He didn't need some glossy announcement. One sharp message from him, backed by the Pentagon. And the whole fantasy collapsed like a cheap tent in a storm. Trump called it what it really was, her bathtubs in the Arctic. Because let's be honest here, what good is a shiny new fleet of German or Korean submarines if they can't integrate with systems? NATO interoperability isn't some optional feature. It's the engine under the hood. Without you, tech. Without you, intelligence. These submarines are dead weight. You're basically buying a luxury sports car without an engine. And that's the part Carney never wanted Canadians to think about. He paraded around like he had cracked the code to independence, when in fact he was selling a fantasy where Berlin or Seoul would defy Washington just to make Carney look strong. But no NATO ally is going to burn its relationship with the United States for Ottawa's ego trip. Germany knows it. South Korea knows it. Their defense industries live or die on you. Goodwill. Without American approval, their subs can't be fully armed, can't be properly networked, and can't be operated effectively in real combat. So the enthusiasm began to fade fast, behind closed doors. The tough public talk softened into hesitation. German officials knew they couldn't risk open defiance of Washington. South Korea understood its export markets depend on you. Approval? Suddenly, Carney's done deal looked like a giant question mark. Reporters flipped their tone overnight. One day, it was Canada boldly charting its own course. The next day, the headlines screamed about uncertainty, delays, and technical chaos. Editorials openly asked if $20 billion was about to be set on fire. And here's the kicker, Trump didn't even have to lift a finger beyond that one comment. He forced the question no Canadian leader wants to confront. Without America, what do you really have? Spend all the money you want. Hold as many press tours as you like. But if Washington says no, your whole project collapses. That's blunt. That's humiliating. And that's the truth. Carney's credibility evaporated almost instantly. He had presented himself as a savior who would finally break free from dominance. Instead, he looked like a fool selling Canadians an illusion. Opposition parties pounced, calling it reckless, naive, humiliating. Even allies shook their heads, saying he overplayed his hand. Military insiders began leaking frustration, admitting the Navy couldn't actually operate German or Korean subs without American support. Imagine spending tens of billions just to end up with a fleet you can't plug into NATO systems. That's not sovereignty. That's self-sabotage on a national scale. And the chaos only deepened. Procurement meetings turned into bureaucratic nightmares. Contractors got nervous. Lawmakers grew skeptical. The Navy grew louder with its concerns. Every committee session became a desperate scramble to justify a plan that was crumbling in real time. And every headline reminded Canadians of the same thing. Carney had promised strength but delivered weakness. He had promised independence but showcased dependency. He had promised leadership but exposed himself as a banker playing dress-up in global politics. Trump, meanwhile, walked away with an effortless victory. He didn't need to strong arm. He didn't need months of maneuvering. One direct shot, one truth bomb, and Carney's house of cards collapsed. That's the difference between a leader who commands respect and a bureaucrat who relies on appearances. Trump proved again that he sets the rules inside NATO, whether Carney likes it or not. And let's be real here. The message to NATO allies couldn't be clearer. Don't pretend you can outmaneuver Washington. Don't pretend your equipment deals mean anything without you. Est integration? And for Canada, the message was brutal. Stop pretending you're in charge. Because when Trump is on the field, Ottawa's game plan doesn't matter. Right now, Canada's submarine program isn't a vision of strength. It's a symbol of weakness. $20 billion burned on paper, chaos in procurement, hesitation from partners, and an angry public watching another government promise collapse. For Carney personally, it's a fall from grace he may never recover from. His chest thumping turned into public embarrassment. His so-called independence turned into proof of dependency. His credibility, once his greatest asset, is gone again. That's where we stand. The submarines aren't arriving. The plan is in chaos, and Canada looks weaker than ever before. Mark Carney thought he could walk into Europe, wave a checkbook, and suddenly Canada would be taken seriously as a military power. But let's cut through the theatrics. Europe isn't fooled. Germany isn't about to risk its relationship with Washington just to build submarines for Ottawa. South Korea knows its entire defense export market hinges on American support. These countries might play along for appearances, but the moment Trump drew a red line, they backed off. Because at the end of the day, every NATO ally understands one hard fact. Without America, there is no Western defense architecture. So while Carney paraded around as if he had found Canada's path to independence, the actual power dynamics slapped him down instantly. What looked like a celebration in front of cameras turned into desperation behind closed doors. Germany and South Korea cooled off quickly, and suddenly Carney was left scrambling to save face. He extended his European trip, scheduled extra visits, and tried to reassure Canadians that nothing had changed. But the writing was on the wall. The partners he bragged about weren't willing to defy Trump. And why would they? Look at the cold hard facts. German submarines. Korean submarines without American technology. They can't even be fully armed. You cannot integrate them into NATO networks. You cannot deploy them effectively in real-world missions. The Pentagon knows it. NATO knows it. Trump knows it. And frankly, Carney himself knows it. But he still tried to sell the illusion that Canada could go it alone. That illusion collapsed the second Washington flexed. Now, instead of projecting strength, Canada looks like the weak link. Procurement is paralyzed. Media coverage shifted from excitement to mockery. What was supposed to be Canada's proudest defense purchase is now portrayed as a reckless gamble. And the Canadian Navy is leaking frustration because they're being asked to plan operations with submarines they know won't actually function without American integration. You can imagine how morale must feel, being told billions are being spent, yet knowing the fleet will be dead weight without you. Systems, the irony is almost painful. Carney tried to show Canadians independence from Trump, but all he's proven is Trump's dominance. Trump called the submarines bathtubs in the Arctic, and that insult landed harder than any carefully worded press release. Because he's right. What's the point of buying the most expensive toys if they're useless in combat? Carney wanted Canadians to believe they were entering a new era of sovereignty. Instead, he made Canada look like a teenager borrowing daddy's car keys and pretending to be independent. Let's not forget how massive this deal was pitched. 12 submarines, each costing around $2 billion, plus the infrastructure to build, maintain, and operate them. Estimates suggested the program could climb into the $100 billion range over decades, making it the single largest defense acquisition in Canadian history. Carney hyped it as the proof of Canada's new global role. Yet now, the very scale of the deal only makes the embarrassment more severe. The bigger the gamble, the bigger the failure. And failure is exactly what this looks like. Procurement chaos, hesitation from foreign partners, technical incompatibilities, skeptical lawmakers, and a humiliated prime minister. The opposition has torn Carney apart. They call him reckless, naive, delusional. Even voices inside his own circle admit he overplayed his hand. He wanted a legacy project to prove his leadership, and instead he delivered a political nightmare. The Canadian public isn't blind either. Ordinary taxpayers see billions being promised for submarines that may never even sail. They remember the disaster of the used British subs that turned into a maintenance nightmare. They're asking the obvious question: why should we trust the government to handle this massive purchase when it failed so miserably before? And the answer is simple. They shouldn't. Canadians see through the spin. Meanwhile, Trump is laughing all the way to another political win. He didn't need to block the deal through complicated negotiations. He didn't need endless diplomacy or backroom maneuvers. Just one statement, one blunt reminder of reality. And the Canadian project froze. That's real power. That's influence. That's leadership. And it shows NATO allies once again that Washington sets the rules. And here's the devastating part. Carney can't even spin his way out anymore. The more he talks, the more desperate he looks. Every new speech is supposed to project confidence, but instead it highlights weakness. Every photo op at a shipyard is supposed to show strength, but instead it underscores dependency. The media now frames him as a banker in a costume, a man who mistook press conferences for actual power, and every headline about uncertainty and chaos only drives that image deeper. The Canadian Navy, the very institution that should be excited about a new fleet, is leaking doubts left and right. Officers whisper about the impossibility of operating without you. Its systems, military analysts warn of the strategic disaster of spending tens of billions for submarines that can't even be integrated into NATO. The phrase self-sabotage is being thrown around. And when your own armed forces start using words like that, the leadership has lost control of the narrative. Think about the sheer absurdity of it. Canada set out to buy independence and ended up buying humiliation. And instead of projecting sovereignty, Carney exposed dependency. Instead of showing strength, he highlighted weakness. Instead of building credibility, he destroyed his own. And for what? To pretend that Ottawa could stand up to Trump, to act like Canada could chart its own defense course without Washington's approval. It was never realistic. And Trump exposed that fact with surgical precision. Now Canada faces the worst of all outcomes. A submarine program that may never materialize. Billions wasted in planning, credibility shredded, and international partners hesitant to engage further. Carney promised Canadians the fleet that would secure the Arctic. And what they're actually getting is a national embarrassment. The proud announcement turned into a cautionary tale overnight. And let's be blunt, the fallout goes beyond just submarines. It shakes Canada's credibility in every defense discussion moving forward. When Ottawa enters the room, allies will remember how easily Trump torpedoed their grand plan. When contractors negotiate, they'll remember how fast enthusiasm evaporated under pressure. When Canadians hear promises about sovereignty, they'll remember how those promises collapsed the moment Washington said no. So where does that leave Canada now? Stuck. Trapped in the middle of a procurement disaster with no clear way forward. Do they cancel the program and admit humiliation? Do they try to renegotiate with Germany and South Korea, knowing Washington will never allow independence? Or do they sink deeper into the mess, spending billions more on a fleet that can't be fully armed or deployed? None of those options look good. And for Carney personally, the damage may be permanent. He wanted to be remembered as the Prime Minister who secured Canada's independence. Instead, he'll be remembered as the man who burned $20 billion chasing a fantasy. His legacy won't be strength, it will be humiliation. His career won't be marked by boldness, it will be defined by naivety. And every time his name comes up, people will remember the fiasco of the submarine deal. That's the reality. That's the brutal truth. And that's why this story matters, sir. It's not just about submarines. It's about power, credibility, and the illusion of independence. Carney tried to sell Canada on a dream, and Trump crushed it overnight. So let's step back and ask the big question. What does this whole fiasco actually reveal about Canada's place in the world? Because it's not just about one submarine deal. It's about the brutal reality of geopolitics. Carney wanted to prove Canada could make its own choices, build its own fleet, and chart its own destiny. But the truth that Trump exposed is simple. Canada's independence is a myth. Without Washington, Ottawa has no military credibility. Without you, so integration, Canada's most expensive defense programs are worthless. Trump didn't just block a deal. He reminded everyone, from Berlin to Seoul to Ottawa, that America still sets the rules. And when America says no, that's the end of the conversation. Carney could hold 100 press conferences, parade through every European shipyard, and brag about his vision for the Arctic. None of it mattered. The second Trump spoke, the entire plan collapsed. That is real power. That is dominance, and that is why Canada looks weaker than ever before. Think about the scale of this humiliation. $20 billion on the line. With the potential to rise to $100 billion over decades. It was supposed to be the crown jewel of Canada's defense modernization. It was supposed to prove Ottawa could lead, not follow. And yet, instead of a proud moment, it turned into a global embarrassment. Allies snicker, rivals laugh, and Canadians wonder why their leaders keep gambling with their credibility. The fallout is massive. Procurement chaos means delays in replacing the old submarines, which will be retired by 2035. That leaves Canada with shrinking capabilities in the Atlantic, Pacific, and Arctic. 3 critical coasts that require constant defense presence. The Navy already struggles to maintain operational readiness with broken British boats. Now, thanks to Carney's blunder, they faced the very real prospect of having no credible submarine fleet at all. Meanwhile, the political damage is severe. Opposition parties aren't just criticizing the program, they're branding Carney as incompetent, reckless, and out of his depth. Even friendly voices in the media have turned against him, painting him as a man who mistook photo ops for leadership. The image of Carney touring shipyards with a big smile, only to be undercut days later by Trump, will haunt him forever. It's the kind of humiliation that sticks, the kind that defines a politician's legacy, and let's not underestimate the message this sends to NATO for European allies. The lesson is clear. Canada cannot deliver on its promises without Washington. For adversaries like Russia and China, the takeaway is equally clear. Canada is weak, dependent, and vulnerable. Every time Carney claimed Canada could secure the Arctic independently, Trump's counterpunch exposed it as empty talk. That weakens deterrence, that invites challenges, that undermines everything Ottawa was trying to project. This is why Trump's move was so devastating. It wasn't just a rejection of one deal, it was a demonstration of who really controls Western defense. Trump showed NATO that flashy announcements mean nothing without you. Approval. He showed Canada that independence cannot be bought with foreign contracts. And he showed the world that America still holds the keys to power, no matter how loudly others brag about sovereignty. Carney, on the other hand, looks finished. His credibility is shattered. His independence narrative is destroyed. His leadership image has been exposed as hollow. Canadians see through the spin. They don't see a strong leader. They see a banker playing dress up, selling them a fantasy and wasting billions in the process. And every new headline about procurement delays or submarine chaos reinforces that perception. It's a fall from grace that feels almost inevitable. Carney was always more comfortable in boardrooms than in battlefields. He mistook economic jargon for strategic vision. He thought a defense deal was just another financial contract, something you can negotiate with numbers and spreadsheets. But geopolitics doesn't work like that. Power isn't about budgets, it's about leverage. And Trump proved he has it, while Carney does not. So where does Canada go from here? The options are ugly. Cancel the program. And you admit humiliation while leaving the Navy without a future fleet. Push forward with Germany or South Korea, and you end up with submarines that can't function in NATO. Try to renegotiate with Washington, and you expose yourself as dependent after loudly claiming independence. Every path is a trap, and every outcome proves Trump right. And let's be honest, Trump's victory here goes beyond Canada. It sends a chilling signal to every NATO country tempted to sidestep Washington. It says, don't bother. No matter how big the contract, no matter how flashy the announcement, if America doesn't approve, it won't work. That's a message Berlin understands. That's a message Seoul understands. And that's why they're already cooling off behind closed doors. Nobody wants to bet against the United States. For Canada, the consequences will be long-lasting. Billions wasted, credibility gone, and a military modernization plan in ruins. Carney wanted a legacy of strength. Instead, he'll be remembered for one of the biggest defense procurement disasters in Canadian history. His gamble to show independence has backfired so completely that it's hard to imagine him recovering politically. The humiliation is total, and the contrast with Trump is brutal. Trump walks away with another clean win. He didn't waste effort. He didn't drag it out. He didn't even need to negotiate. He delivered one sharp truth, and the Canadian plan collapsed under its own weight. That's power. That's respect. And that's why Trump still dominates NATO conversations. Whether Carney likes it or not, the final message is crystal clear. Don't pretend you can outmaneuver Washington. Don't pretend your contracts mean anything without you. Systems. And don't pretend Canada can stand tall without America's support. Carney tried to sell independence, and Trump proved it was a lie. So here we are. Canada is humiliated, Carney is exposed, and Trump stands taller than ever. The submarines aren't coming. The procurement is in chaos, and the illusion of Canadian sovereignty has been shattered. For NATO allies, the lesson is simple. America speaks, and everyone else listens. For Carney, the humiliation is permanent. And for Canadians, the price tag is billions of dollars and a legacy of weakness. That's the story. That's the disaster. And that's why this submarine fiasco will be remembered for years to come, not as a triumph of independence, but as the day Carney's fantasy collapsed overnight